Around the world, as promised, a remnant remains, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Welcome to Remnant Podcast.
All right, man. So we're back again with our By the Book Bible study.
By the book.
I was excited about this first time. I'm still excited about this. I think you and I are even going to grow through this in our understanding.
Yeah.
You know, anytime you go to the book.
Well, Romans we're covering Romans. If you guys watched the first one, and like you said in the first one, Romans is it's
the essentials of the faith.
Yes,
there.
Yes,
it's
an important book.
Amazing book. And in the first episode, we got through verses 1 through 5.
1 through 5, yeah.
And I honestly do recommend you going back and listening to it. Now, there are kind of times it seems like we're rabbit trailing, but we're really not, because it's connected to the verses. These verses are igniting these ideas to bring into the discussion, and that's cool. That's what the Bible does. But we don't know how far we're going to make it today.
Yeah.
But we're going to, we'll just see. I'm going to pick it back up where we left off. I'm going to read verse 6 through verse 14. Or let's see. Yeah, verse 14. It ends with a period. That's good. Some of these verses end with a colon or semicolon. I like to read on to the period. So I'm going to read verse 6 through verse 14, and we'll just go from there. And I read out of the King James Version, so it may be a little bit Old English, but that's clear enough to understand, I think. Among whom are ye also the called of Jesus Christ? To all that be in Rome, beloved of God, called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request, if by any means now at length I might have a prosperous journey by the will of God to come unto you. For I long to see you, that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift, to the end you may be established. In other words, for the purpose that, you may be established. That is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purposed to come unto you, parenthesis, but was let hitherto. So let me back up, because I like reading it without the parenthesis, because it makes it clear.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purpose to come unto you, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. I am debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. So, Alan, start unpacking it wherever you want to, man. I'm all ears.
Okay, so the best of my understanding, I'm going to start on 8. Now, if you feel that you need to go back 6 and 7.
The only thing I'll say real briefly, take me about 30 seconds, and then you can go with verse 8, is I probably should have just kind of backed up to verse 1 and read it all so that it's clear, but I love verse 6, because Paul has just said of himself in verse 5, he said, we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations for his name, colon. So in other words, not the end of the sentence. Among whom are ye also the called of Jesus Christ? And so it's encouragement. You are called of Jesus Christ to something, called to salvation, called to share the gospel, called to do a lot of things. And so everybody who's a Christian is called, and he's acknowledging that right here. And I think that's awesome.
Yes.
And then he says, to all that be in Rome, beloved of God. Because he's talking to saints. He's talking to believers. Beloved of God. I just like that. It's encouraging. It's I like to think of that sometimes, that we are beloved of God, even though we're unworthy. We're called of God, even though we're not righteous, but, in our own works. But okay, so carry on. Verse 8.
Excuse me. Sorry. So it says, first I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. So even though Paul himself really didn't have anything to do with their faith particularly, okay, he had heard about them. I mean, you hear about when just us as people, you hear about someone, you're like, oh, you're the one I've heard about. And that's how he feels. I feel like he almost feels awestruck that, as it says later on, he's praying to go there, and he wants to go there. It says that later on even too. You know, someone who shares and is strong in the faith is like you are. I mean, that's...
Yeah. You want to be around them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's why if you go to a church where you're like, oh man, I got to go to church. I don't really like these people. Man, find you a church where you're like family. Yeah. I mean, ours is.
Oh, I know ours is. Yeah. This is the greatest church environment I've ever been in my life. I love it.
The best. So, you know, he's just, well, first, I guess I should have started with this. He thanks God.
Ain't that good? Yeah.
Well, thanksgiving to God is always in your everyday prayer life. That should be the very first thing you do. You give God thanksgiving. Because the fact, and you always have something to thank Him for. You woke up this morning. For some people, that may not be good. I mean, there's people out there that are suffering very, very much, and they're ready to go home. But the fact, if you can be thankful to God for you know what? I woke up, I took my first breath this morning. Thank you, God.
Yeah, and even for those that maybe waking up this morning wasn't necessarily good because they're ready to go home, they need to be thankful that they got a home to go to in
That's
heaven.
True. That is very true.
To be thankful
so
for.
There's always something.
That's
You're right. There's
yes.
always something to be thankful for.
Yes.
So he just, you know, to me, he's like, thank you, God, for the Romans, for these people that are also called, how does it say, to be called to be saints.
Called to be saints.
I mean, just
yeah.
I don't know. To me, I a lot of times when I read this, I'm like, okay, put yourself in Paul's perspective. How are you feeling when you're, you know, and you just think about someone that's got the same faith, and you're just, I guess it's like I feel, I'm serious when I come to church on Sundays. I'm excited. I love it. I mean, it's probably the highlight of my week.
Paul definitely had a strong sense of his spiritual family, the brotherhood, his brothers and sisters, the children of God. He had a strong sense of that, and he's kind of like saying, so I hear, apparently I've got family in Rome, because these believers, these people of great faith in God, I want to come meet them. I want to be with them. You know, I want to, maybe I can do something to help them, because we also do realize Paul was an incredible apostle, you know, heavily gifted by God in many spiritual things, which even comes to light in a couple of verses. Yeah. And he's like, I want to go and be a help in any way I can, and you know, help establish them. And so he had a longing, so to speak. Yes. Yeah. It's awesome. So I'm going to go on 9.
Go ahead,
we
go with
8? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, for God is my witness. Let's stop right there. When he's talking to them, he's saying, you already know he's a strong man of faith. And he's going to tell you, look, God is my witness. Everything he's fixing, you know,
he's saying
it's
he true.
It's from the heart.
True. Yeah,
because you don't say this person is my witness, and that person goes, "You're a liar." Yeah, you know. Yeah, no, that's not. I mean, he's, you know. So for God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of His Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers. So he's saying, you know what? I pray for you guys constantly, and God can tell you.
God Himself would approve. Agree. What I'm telling y'all is true. That's
you could just imagine God saying, "I approve this message." I mean, to me, that just came to my head. I don't know why, but
I like it though.
But I mean, you kind of, when you read and you go back and you look at what we said before, you know, he heard about their faith throughout the whole world, and he prays for them. I mean, it all ties back to each other, and that's one thing. It's I don't know. It's just so wonderful. It's great. Just put yourself. That's how I do it. When I'm reading the Bible, I put myself in, you know, I try to put myself.
Yeah.
Well, because you almost feel the feelings. I mean, you almost can because you've said this before. You read the Bible enough, and someone can read something to you, not even tell you where it's from, and you can tell what book, or at least one of the books, because of how it's read. And in our Bible study at church, we're reading John. Now, there's a difference between John and Paul, but they are both very zeal.
Yeah,
for
they have
their,
a great love of God and a zeal for the people of God. And God, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So, I mean, it's just
You're making me think of something. Well, this verse makes me think of. Paul says it 4 times, not in this exact quote, but he says this concept 4 times in the New Testament. And I think only he can even rightly say this and it not be wrong. But he says, "Be ye followers of me as I am of Christ."
Yeah.
And here is what he means. I pray, God is my witness. I pray for you guys without ceasing. And I long to be like Paul has lived a template of something that we are to look at and say, that's our pattern. He's our example in a lot of ways. I often say it this way, and I'll have to be careful to qualify it, but Paul is like our Moses in the New Testament. Yeah. Moses, was their example. Moses was their judge in a sense, and even Paul judges certain things for the church. It's Paul, the apostle, who actually establishes for us certain offices in the church. He himself went and ordained elders. He ordained bishops. He ordained deacons. He told Timothy and Titus to structure things in this way. It was Paul who was given that. Okay, again, why do I say Paul is like our Moses? Moses was given a vision of heaven by God.
Yeah.
He was shown things there, and then God said, "What you have seen in heaven, I want you to make a pattern of it on earth." That's what he told Moses, and Moses did that. The tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, all of those things was done under the supervision of Moses. Well, Paul himself also says at one point, he was caught up to the third heaven. He says, whether in the body or out of the body, I can't tell. But he was shown by Christ. It's obvious that he was. It doesn't actually say it, but he had to have been, the Spirit of God revealed it to him or whatever. He was shown by Christ sort of this template of this is what the church is supposed to look like and be like and operate like, and you set it up. And so anyway, long story short, Paul is kind of like a Moses to us in a sense of he laid out, where do you find these doctrines of church order and discipline and all this? But his epistles, you don't find it in Peter or even 1st, 2nd, or 3rd John. You find it in Ephesians, Colossians, Thessalonians. Those were letters to churches of what to do. And so it just, again, be ye followers of me as I am of Christ. Paul is saying, follow this pattern I have laid out for you. And this is one of the beautiful places, is all I was getting it back down to, is he prayed. Yeah. He prayed for his fellow believer from his heart daily. And like you're saying, when you look at his whole sort of message and all the things that he did and said, and you begin to think about it from his perspective, you begin to feel what he must have felt. You begin to think, he must have felt very compassionate towards these people or whatever. And so it's very interesting. I didn't mean to take you off course, but I'll read the verse again one more time, and then you can collect your thoughts and unpack it. He says, "For God is my witness." And like you said, he don't say that very flippantly. He's not saying that like the bum down the road. God is my witness. I saw a nader take up Ethel to,
Well, just like if you read from the beginning, his sincereness. So that's what tells you when he says, "For God is my witness." Well, how sincere he's already been up to this point.
Yes. Yeah, he's very, very serious. He's already set that tone. I agree. Okay, so "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers." Go ahead. Yeah. Unpack it more or whatever you feel like doing. Or you can go to the next verse. I don't care. It's up to you.
Is there anything you want to add tonight?
I did want to add one thing, and you can just get your thoughts collected on the next verse while I speak. Something we passed in verse 8 that I just wanted to mention is Paul says this a lot. Through Jesus Christ. Like he says, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all. And he says that phrase, through Jesus Christ, through Jesus Christ, through Jesus Christ. It comes up in his writings often and all the time. And a lot of times people don't really understand because it is worded in such a way that's kind of weird. It's like, what do you mean I thank my God through Jesus Christ? Well, Paul sees himself, like we talked about last week about the grace.
Yep.
He sees himself, I'm an apostle through Jesus Christ. You know, Christ is the one that done this. I've received grace through Christ. I have received apostleship and the ability to even be obedient to the faith through Christ. And he says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthened me. It's through Paul sees everything that he does in this life as being through, in other words, because of, and by the power of, and by the grace of, and by the life of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to see life. You could say, I came to church today through Jesus Christ, my Lord, and I'm here to serve him and worship him. Everything I'm doing through his power, through his gift, and for his sake or whatever. And so, okay, yeah, go ahead with whatever you feel like going with.
All right, so in 10, let me see how I'm going to do this. I'm going to read it first.
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Making request, if by some means now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. Okay, so this right here, and let's go back to verse 1 where it says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So we broke that down last week. A servant follows what his master says.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not, even though you could tell he wants to go to Rome. He's ready to go to Rome. He wants to be with these people. He's letting God, Jesus, he's following their lead.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
He said, well, it's not time yet. And he's ready, but he's not going. He's going to make sure that his master says, now it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that must have been, think about how hard that had to have been on him. I'll bring this up again, going to church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Our church starts at 12:30. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's a 45-minute drive for me, but I'm raring. I'm ready to go. But that's the way he feels. He wants to go. Mm-hmm. He's ready, but he's got to wait for,
Well, he again, this is how Paul sees life, and it's how we ought to see life. If Paul saw life that way, then that's the way life is. He sees life as, well, in another place in the book of Acts, it tells us that he had sought to go and be with a certain church, and I cannot say that, I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it's Antioch or something. He says, but Satan had hindered him, and he looks at all of these things as God. This is ultimately God's doing. And here's an interesting thing there is he says, making request to who? To God. He's praying. He's making request to God. So in other words, he's praying. He's saying that I pray.
Yeah.
And making mention of you always in my prayers, making a request. So in his prayer, he is making a request to God that he may be able to make this journey to see those Christians at Rome. However, nowadays there's a whole movement of people that don't make requests. They make demands.
Yeah.
They say, I'm going to Rome and can't hell or Satan stop me because I've got the power of God. I can name it and claim it and all this. I can command the winds and seas. And I tell people all the time, God tells us to make our request known.
Yeah.
And in James, it's connected to this. James says, you say, I'm going to go here this year and sell some stuff and make some money and go there. And he said, but what you ought to say is, if it be the will of God, I'll go do this. Paul did do that. If it's the will of God, I'm praying, I'm making request, because God says you can make your request, but it's according to the will of God.
Yep.
That by the will of God, I'd have a prosperous journey and that I would be able to make it there, because he was certainly under attack all the time by the devil and people.
Yep.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So, man, I just trying to, I guess I keep going back to this. The emotion of Paul, when you read Romans, you can't help but feel the emotions of Paul in this. And he knows that when he gets to Rome, that they're gonna make a difference in his life. He's gonna make a difference in their life, and that's where I guess verse 11 comes in. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift, so that you may be established. Mm-hmm. So, my thought is, or I guess my question is, and you may be able to help me on this, and I've dug into it a little bit, and trying to think of what book it was in where it talks about spiritual gifts. But do you think that he already knew the spiritual gift, or was God going to reveal the spiritual gift when he got there?
This is a much debated verse throughout history. Really
I'm sure it is. That's probably why it keep me. I don't know how many times I read it.
Yeah, because what he's saying is clear. It's there in black and white, but what does he mean is very unclear.
Yeah.
Because there's one group of people that thinks that he could convey or whatever a gift of the Spirit to you by touch. There's a group of people that thinks that what he means is that he could say, he could touch someone and give them the gift of tongues or give them the gift of healing or whatever. And then there's another group of people that say, no, that's not really what he's talking about. It may be that there's a lot, a preacher is called a spiritual gift. Mm-hmm. In Ephesians chapter 5, a teacher is called a spiritual gift. Yep. And so when we look at like Timothy and Titus, he told Timothy and Titus, for this cause, I think it was Titus, for this cause I left you in Crete to set in order those things which are lacking and to establish the churches, so to mm-hmm. speak. And so in that sense, they were being established with a good, solid Bible teacher and this, that, and the other. And so I don't know the answer. It's something that
maybe the spiritual gift was by the Lord lead him. Maybe not everybody got the same spiritual gifts. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, say that again. So you're saying maybe not everybody got the same spiritual gift. What I'm saying is I don't even necessarily know that he may be, and I'm totally not against it. Whatever it says or whatever it means, that's what I want to discover. I don't want to determine what it says. I want to discover what it says. I don't necessarily know that he's talking here about spiritual gifts in the sense of what we think of in Corinthians chapter 2, verse 12, or Corinthians, I can't remember. One of the Corinthians, chapter 12, 13, and 14, the teaching on the spiritual gifts, where he says, now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, concerning spiritual gifts.
Right.
Okay, I don't necessarily know that right there he's talking about that kind of thing, because it could be, but it also, there's a lot of different gifts, so to speak, of the Holy Spirit, like grace or a good solid church to go to. In a way, that's a gift of the Spirit. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know that he's necessarily talking about what we would consider these miraculous gifts of the Spirit. He may be. I just don't really know. But what we do know is that what he's saying is, he says, the way yours worded it is more clear. But he says here, to the end that you may be established. In other words, for the whole purpose to establish, to make you firm in the faith and in the doctrines of the gospel of God's Son, Jesus Christ. That's his whole agenda. That's his whole hope and goal. It wasn't necessarily to empower people with some supernatural thing. Maybe he did that, but I don't know. I don't fully understand it. I'll just be honest with you.
We'll see. And like you said, hotly debated over the years.
Debated,
because to try and get a clearer sense for myself, I did read a commentary on just this to try to, because I was like, I'm stumped. Mm-hmm. And okay, so now that you've told me it's hotly debated, well, maybe there was a reason I'm stumped, because not really anybody can fully understand what he's saying here. But in 12, and this will tie in to 11, he says that's usually how you correct yourself. Mm-hmm. So he says that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith both of you and me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
what did the commentary say?
On which one?
The verse verse 11. You said you read a commentary on it. What was it? Did you get anything out of it or no? Was you done talking about that or did we get sidetracked?
Well, so I read the first commentary and it was kind of like, to me, it felt like it really wasn't even covering the question.
Okay.
And then the next commentary, that's how I found the teaching on the spiritual gifts in 1 Corinthians. Mm-hmm. And then, so I went to 1 Corinthians and read, and then I was still, all right. So when I said to you, the commentary said that Paul may not even have known the spiritual gift. Mm-hmm. He may have known. God may have already revealed it to him. He may not know until he gets there and it's revealed to him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you look in the way God works, it could be either way because God already knows who needs what. But
yeah, I guess, man, I don't want to take you off track at all.
Go ahead.
I need to admit, I perhaps have a bias in how I understand this. I don't know that to be the case. But again, to me, look, if you read like what you said, that was really good. And you said that is like he's qualifying, or you said correcting, but he's kind of giving more context to what he just said.
Yep.
And so he says, first of all, he says, I long to see you. Again, this is the love of Paul for the people. Yep. I long to see you. But he says that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to the end that you may be established. That is, that I may be encouraged or comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Here's what I'm getting at. The fact that he says the word spiritual gift, people in their minds immediately go to these, what's called the gifts of the Spirit, as far as like sort of miraculous supernatural gifts. But that doesn't have to be what he's talking about. Let me give you an example. If all the apostles showed up at church today, just his presence would impart to me the gift of being encouraged.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like just him coming there.
Yeah.
And his just him showing up would be like, by the way, there is a gift of encouragement. You know what I'm saying? And so he just his presence, I would be spiritually encouraged.
I didn't think of it that way.
Yes.
Because he's already telling them that their faith is being talked about throughout the whole world.
Yeah.
So that would be encouraging to him and to them because he's coming to see them.
Right, yeah.
He's heard about them.
Yes.
And he, like you said, longs to see them, to visit.
Yes.
So...
Yes, and if we think about the world during this time, these churches during the lifetime of Paul this is when the church was being established.
Yes.
That this is when the church was, the church has always been there in a sense. You know, even Moses calls Israel coming out of Egypt the church in the wilderness. And so a group of believers has always been there in a sense, but it was really not until Jesus Christ came that we can have what we call the New Testament or New Covenant church. And Jesus said, upon this rock, I will build my church. So it was a building that was about to be built up and all that. And Paul is one of the main tools that Christ is using to establish and build the church. And so when he uses the word establish, I think that's a significant word. It gives us a context to what does he mean? How do you establish someone? Well, see, Paul went around and started many churches. He was a pastor at Ephesus for a while. He wrote, the reason we have the letters to the Corinthians and to the Thessalonians and to the Ephesians was because he wrote them to those churches to establish them in the faith. Establish meaning to start them off right on the fundamental doctrines of Christ. You know, that's what he means. He was setting firm the things that needed to be set firm. And so all I'm saying is this could mean he was going to give them the gift of healing and give them the gift of tongues and give them the gift of knowledge and give them the gift of wisdom. It could mean that. However, in the context, it doesn't seem to mean that. It seems like he meant something different.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, that's my 2 cents on it. I would really like to study a little bit more. But when he says that is, it's almost like he's saying the gift that I would be encouraged and you would be encouraged, and encouraging is a gift. I tell Katrina all the time, Alan's a gift. Well, because you encourage me all the time, you know what I mean? And so, you're a gift to me in a sense. And she says it too. She's like, God put Alan in your life because you have been a help to me in a lot of ways, and I don't want to get sidetracked with it, but it could be something that simple. You know?
Well, you just opened my eyes because right after the spiritual gift, he does talk about, encouraged. And when you said what you said, I was like, man, think about the people that are placed in your lives. You just covered this. Think about the people that are placed in your lives. They're in your lives for a reason. Mm-hmm. God put them in your life for a reason.
That's right. And that's how he sees it too. God's doing, this is God's doing.
And that's the way that me and Bobby feel about your family. Who'd have thought pigs brought our families together?
Yeah, man, selling pigs, trading pigs. Yeah.
So it's just, when you think about it, God works in amazing ways. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just if you're a believer, you've probably already realized what works in that God has done in your life to open your eyes to something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you're not a believer, I've already said, look, even if you're not a believer, unless you're completely anti-God, I guarantee you have a Bible in your house somewhere. Yeah. If you travel a lot, there's
Bibles in every hotel
room. Mm-hmm. It may not be the best translation, but it's there.
It's there, man. Yeah.
And this is kind of getting off base a little bit, but just the fact that there still are Bibles in every hotel room is almost encouraging. It's very encouraging. The Word of God is not dead.
That's right, man.
It never will.
I thank God for the Gideon people that put those Bibles out there too, man. I don't even know what the version is, but I know this: the gospel is intact enough in those books that and by the way, just to clarify, I said the word intact, not attacked. But I said it so quickly that it may have sounded like I was saying attacked. No, I'm saying it's still there. That I couldn't tell you how many people has been converted and saved by reading the Gideon's Bible. Man.
Well, okay, and we've talked about this before, or I talked about it on the last by the book, that God broke Paul down because of the person he was before to make him who he was. If anyone has ever had to travel for a living, you have some long days and you feel so broken at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is opening that drawer. Let's see what's in this drawer. You open it, there's the Bible. Mm-hmm. By curiosity or by something leading you read that Bible. That could change your whole life.
Yeah. Somebody just shows up in the hotel room and maybe they see the Bible there and they're like, oh man, I ain't heard nothing out of here since I was a kid. And they're just like, let's see what this ridiculous thing says. And then they're like, oh, he was bruised for my transgressions. And they start thinking about it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It has power, man.
All you got to do is open it. And I'm not saying that this is what happens, but where you open and start reading, there's probably a reason that you started reading right there.
Yeah, it could very well be the case, man. And I know that's happened for me before,
I mean, I don't know. I'm encouraged.
Yeah. Well, think of what how much of a spiritual blessing and gift it is to be encouraged and to have someone that enters into your life that is an encouragement to you, that is a strength to you, that is a hope to you. Like I said, can you imagine if the Apostle Paul showed up here? We would all be encouraged. If he showed up here and was like, hey, I heard of you guys' faith. I wanted to come visit.
He'd be a guest on our podcast. We'd put a third chair right here.
I would be like, hey, you sit right here and talk, man. We're just going to sit and listen. Yes. And I can't believe you're here, brother, man.
Could you imagine soaking in? I
wouldn't. I'd be like, I just want to listen to everything you got to say, man. So his presence, in a sense, was a gift of encouragement to those people, and they had given him the great gift of encouragement because He says it. He was encouraged by hearing their faith. This is a man who'd faced so many trials. He had been through so much. He had every reason to be discouraged, but he's not.
Yeah.
He's encouraged because he hears of faith and people in Rome. And, it's just awesome.
This book's full of people that had reason to be discouraged.
Yes.
Job.
Yeah. Oh, Lord of mercy.
My God. He lost everything.
Yeah.
And wouldn't turn from...
It wouldn't turn. He said, the Lord giveth, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
And if you're out there thinking, the devil doesn't try you like that. Look,
oh, Lord mercy.
Look at what he did.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to convince God, let me do that. Do everything, I'll do anything to him but kill him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And man, the Bible does teach us that Satan is like a roaring lion roaming to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. Yeah. Your adversary, the devil, is like a roaring lion, it says. I mean, and in fact, it says your adversary.
Yep.
He's against all of us. And at different times in our lives, we face things and we may not even realize that, it was traps. I mean, the Bible actually says the devil, the wiles of the devil, which is, these, I always think Wile E. Coyote, setting these things out there to try and get you. It says the snares, traps, fiery darts. You know what I'm saying? We may not realize that, this is something the devil done to me here to discourage me or take away my witness. But he does. And Paul had that to deal with, but he was encouraged.
Here's a perfect example. Your days, probably some of the hardest days are Sundays and Wednesdays before we're about to meet. That's when on Wednesdays, something will always go wrong at work. And because like I said, I got 45 minutes from the house to church, but from my work, it's another 15 minutes to the house. So I've got to actually leave on time. I can't let anything hinder me. And something always tries to hinder me on Wednesdays. Always.
I believe that. I do believe the devil does do that.
And they always put the slowest car in front of me on the way to church on Sundays. They always do.
Yeah. And if nothing else, even if it don't it don't hinder you from getting here, what it does get you to is by the time you get here, you're about to explode. It's like
frustrated.
It done got you frustrated, done got you stirred up inside, and all that kind of stuff. And so it happens, man, for sure. You want to pick back up on the verse 12? Let's see, what was it?
Yeah, we just read verse 12.
Well, we can actually end with verse 12 if you want to, because really kind of when he says, now I would not have you ignorant, brethren. Yeah. He's kind of taking on a new...
Okay, yeah.
But we can go on with it. I don't care. But he's kind of taking on a thought, and kind of a new thought has come to his mind. And I guess, I don't know. In a sense, he's continuing on, but...
Yeah, in a way, it does go with...
Really, I guess the new thought really, really begins at verse 16.
Okay.
For I'm not ashamed to, preach. But so we can finish this out if you want to, because, we still got time. You have anything else that you would like to say or add to the...
On 12?
On 12 or 11 or whatever before we move on?
No, how about you?
No, I'm good.
All right. So, now, I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that I often planned to come to you, but was hindered until now, that I might have some fruit among you also, just as among the other Gentiles.
That's just what we was just talking about. He was hindered.
Yeah.
Like he was planning to go. He kept being hindered, but also go ahead with the fruit.
Well, to my knowledge, it doesn't say what hindered him. What, in your mind, in your thoughts, after reading a lot of this, was it he wasn't done where he was at? Was it something like we were just talking about hindered him a constant when he was trying to? And something?
Well, it could have been any, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
In one place, he specifically says that he had purposed, the same language he uses here, he had purposed to go to this other church. He says, but Satan hindered us. In one place, he literally says that. Okay, but in another place, we know that he says that he was shipwrecked 3 times.
Yep.
And so could it be he was like just hindered physically, like there's just a barrier. A barrier. Like maybe he was like on a boat and I was coming, man, but we were hindered. Shipwrecked.
To me, it sounds like it all leads back to the devil. Satan.
It very well could.
He did not want him getting to the Romans.
He didn't want. If you look, it's amazing. If you look on every other page of after you get past Acts chapter 7, I'm not kidding. I've done it. Look, every other page, and they sought to kill Paul. And they sought to kill Paul.
Yeah.
And they lied in wait and sought to kill Paul. And other Christians, of course, too. But, man, I mean, the dude was like, this is like Jesus was. When Jesus was here in the flesh, he was having to constantly avoid stuff because they seeking to kill him constantly. Yeah. And, okay, so it could have been that. It could have been that he was in prison. I don't know if he was in prison when he wrote. I don't know. But we do know that he was in prison like no less than 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
So it could have been that. It could have been a lot of different things, but he, bottom line is he says it himself. He was held up. He was held up. That's basically what it means. I've tried to come, or I want to come. I've purposed to come. I've prayed to be able to come, and I hope to be able to make a prosperous journey to you. But stuff just keeps happening and stopping me,
Yeah.
So.
And now let me think. I'm going to go back to something you said. Now I got to try to remember what it was. I've lost that thought.
That's okay. It's okay.
But he sought to kill.
Oh, okay, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
If you look at what we are going through in this time and age, the Christians are being sought to be killed. I mean, eventually it's going to come down to that. They haven't started executing us yet.
Yes, but they will.
But we talked about it on the last podcast. The steps are already being taken to get us to that point.
Mm-hmm. And it's clear as bell. I mean, Jesus said there'd be wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, famines, earthquakes in diverse places. But he said, but these are the beginning of the sorrows.
Yeah.
And he says, then they shall deliver you up and shall kill you for my name's sake. Okay. In Revelation chapter 6, the 5th seal it's a sort of a vision of heaven there. And he says, and I saw the souls of them under the altar that had been martyred. Mm-hmm. And they cried out, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on earth? Because they had been killed for their faith. Yeah. Now, guess what God said, though? So the question, how long do you not judge and avenge us? And he said, until your fellow servants should be killed such as you were. Yeah. I mean, powerful stuff. So, sought to kill. Right now, they're seeking to sort of get the legislation in place to isolate us, highlight us, and kill us. Really,
right.
I mean,
right. Well, that's. I think it was during your sermon today. You talked about and I'm trying to remember back. I lose my train of thought all the time, people. I promise you, you're going to have to get used to this.
This is part of why it happens here at this table. And the only reason I don't lose my train of thought more than I do is because I've been preaching for 7 years. And it helps because when you're preaching, there's so many distractions and you see so much stuff happen that you just kind of learn you stay on your train of thought and ignore everything else. Like right now, here's why you keep losing your train of thought. Because there's 3 lights right in your face. There's a camera going. There's dogs outside barking. Our kids are screaming. A minute ago, I heard the sheep. And I'm sitting here thinking, all of this is going to come through on the microphones while I'm trying to stay talking and pretend that I don't hear all this.
And you're thinking this is going to be an editing nightmare.
Yes. And so don't feel bad. I'm telling you. Half the time, one skill that you get with podcasting and stuff and speaking publicly, so to speak, because even though there's not a real crowd there, you expect to be, right?
Right.
And one skill that you get is being able to talk when you don't really yet know where, like, you've kind of lost your train of thought. Yeah. But you're able to kind of talk through it, and then all of a sudden, it clicks back in there, and you stay on track, and people never know what happened. Because honestly, I lose my train of thought up there preaching so many times, but I just kind of look back in my notes, and kind of keep going with whatever direction I was going in, and then suddenly it's like, there it is, it comes back to me. So don't feel bad. We've been going for almost 40 minutes or over 40 minutes already, and so we about have a full show, but I do want to finish if you don't mind. So maybe if I reread this verse here, it'll come back to you what you was going to say before the sought to kill thing. And there's something we can say here about the fruit. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purposed to come unto you, but was left hitherto, that I might... Well, let me read it without the parenthesis. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purposed to come unto you, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. What do you get out of that?
So I look at it as I might have some fruit among you. So people with just as strong a faith, passion that Paul has. Mm-hmm. I mean, in my thoughts, and I was reading somewhere that it's thought to have been that there were the majority of Rome were Gentiles. Mm-hmm. So, and like you go back to the mutual faith, they're in the same faith, and that's where you'll find the fruits of other. I mean, you meet somebody, and if you just meet them in passing, you may not know what they have to offer to the faith. Mm-hmm. But once you get to know them, that's where their place is in the faith, and that place might help you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. In one place, he talks about the believers as he says, I'm trying to remember how he words it, but he kind of looks at when a person is saved because of his work and his preaching. It's part of the fruit of his labor.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, because he says, I'm ready to preach the gospel also to you that be in Rome. In one sense, he's hoping to be able to preach, and maybe, people will be converted. But in another sense, I think this is a cool way to think about something. If we are a church goer, are you thinking about what fruit can you have in that church? Because you can bear a lot of fruit in a church if you go and you... Well, like, you doing your study and different things that you're doing, you open and close with prayer a lot of times, and just different things, we can all bear fruit within the people group that we're in. Right. But bearing fruit might mean, just encouraging someone, or bearing fruit might mean helping someone in an understanding, or just, it can be a lot of things. Basically, to me, he just kind of is wanting to be a fruitful person here, to be beneficial, to help in some way and all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's interesting that he's wanting to go there to bear some fruit. We should just kind of think about things that way, know? Not that we're exalting ourselves like we have something to give, but what can we do to help people that may, bear fruit in their life in some way? Praying for them even. Right. You know what I'm saying? So, anything else you want to cover on that? I have pretty much said everything that I know of that I can say today. And plus, like I said a minute ago, we've had all kinds of distractions going on in the background. Yeah. Just I'll edit it out, but I had to go outside and keep my dogs from killing each other a little while ago.
Sundays are just full. They are. I mean, you got before church, then when you're trying to get your families ready for all this and do the preparation for that, then you've got church, you bring the message, you got that on your head, and then after this is all said,
podcasts today.
Yeah, we eat dinner together as a church, and then you're like, okay, now we got to put ourselves. We said that before we come in here. We got to put our minds on podcast mode, right, and get off of the rest.
Yes, and between me and you together, we have 12 children outside.
Yes.
We got 12 kids outside running around playing, and we have about 50 hogs on the farm. And so, there's been a lot kind of happened that's kind of caused me I've lost a little bit of my focus here in this. But honestly, I think we have covered these verses good enough to be able to come back next week and start at verse 14, 15, whatever, and carry on. And honestly, too, we're about to get into some really awesome passages, some awesome verses that are just, you can just go on for days with them. So I'm still excited about it. And if you tuned into part one, well, hopefully you tuned into part two. But what I was going to say is, if you tuned into this one, if you download this one, we have a part one, and this is going to be an ongoing thing that you and I are doing. We're hoping to really get through the whole book of Romans. We may end up kind of having to hit highlights or something. I don't really know, but I want to go through the whole book because there's so much great stuff here, and we really ask that you'd stay with us through the Bible study.
Yeah.
Of course, lots of experiences that we've had in life is going to spill through and make their way through, but that's kind of what a Bible study is, right? It's it's putting your life in the reference and the framework of the Bible. And so you can find us at remnantpodcast.net. Not .com. We're hoping to buy .com, but it's not available yet. But remnantpodcast.net, or on YouTube at Remnant Podcast, or on Odyssey at Remnant Podcast. And then, of course, we have audio versions also that's on the website, and then it's on a bunch of other platforms that I honestly can't even list them all right now. And so if you want to stay going through this with us, go to remnantpodcast.net, and also, please leave questions, comments on YouTube or whatever. And you and I would love to get some questions or comments from people.
Or, and not just in this podcast, our other podcast. If you have something that you'd like us to cover, please comment. We'll look into it, definitely. And I mean, there may come a time where we don't even have to try to find something to talk about.
There may come a time.
People may have we want to hear about this. It's
so much more motivating to do I just hit my microphone. To dig into something when somebody's asking.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I forgot to mention we have not just the Bible study going, but we have another podcast playlist or category of things that you and I are doing called Logos Life. And in that, like today, we covered the globalist agenda in the United States. And, of course, we're going to cover that in more detail because that's going to take at least 2 more parts, I suspect. And so, tune into that stuff. Leave questions, comments, whatever. Tell your friends about it. Help us spread the word. We're not getting any money for any of this.
Nope.
We just want to do it to fulfill Ezekiel.
But we have, but we have a lot of content, not just those 2 podcasts. There's a lot of content on our website. So it's a one-stop shop.
Yep. One-stop shop. I like that. My wife and I do a marriage thing. We do like a news thing. And then also you and Katrina, my wife, and me are actually starting, hopefully within the next 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, on doing street interviews. Which is going to be so cool.
Looking forward to it.
and that's probably going to be a hot item. That one will probably get a whole lot more views. But anyway, I'm good. You good?
I'm good.